Good evening. You're watching The Right Stand with me, Poonam Burde. It's been 39 days since Israel's war against Hamas began. Israeli Defense Forces have struck 4,300 targets till date in their attempt to obliterate the terror group. Hospitals have now become battlefields, unfortunately. Doctors have come out and cried for help for the dozens of patients, including babies who remain trapped inside. They've described the situation as being inside a circle of death. There is no place or opportunity to bury the dead, said the hospital authorities, as the fighting continues outside. Now, Israeli tanks have advanced to the gates of Gaza's biggest hospital in the north. It claims that there are tunnels below that hospital enclave that houses headquarters for Hamas fighters who are using these patients and these innocent civilians as shields. A claim that's been outrightly rejected by Hamas-controlled ministry in Gaza. But which side really is responsible for pushing hospitals into the line of fire? We decode that on this edition of The Right Stand. But first, let's tell you what the cost of this war has been, what the casualty figures really stand at. This is what the war looks like today, 39 days later. 11,200 or more Palestinians have been killed in Gaza so far. The number of Palestinians injured is well above 26,000. The population that has been displaced in Gaza is 70%. Israel says that many of them have been moved southward for their own safety. The number of Israelis killed stands at over 1,400 as far as Israeli Defense Forces go, including the civilians that were killed when terror first struck on the 7th of October. The number of hostages that have been taken by Hamas are at about 240, many of whom might be released in the next few days as promised in a deal of prisoner swap, so to say, by the Hamas terrorists. So why are Israeli forces standing guard outside the best equipped hospital in Gaza? What really has happened that it's come down to this? Here's what the Israeli Defense Forces are claiming. These are visuals that they got to us and of tunnels that were being built that they claim these are tunnels built by Hamas that lead to the Gaza hospital. They're right below the hospital, which is why they need to advance into the hospital and obliterate this network. Terrorists are hiding and operating from inside the hospital is what Israeli Defense Forces are claiming. They've also released video footage to prove that claim, which I'll just be bringing to you in a short while from now. Weapons are being stored at the hospital's basement. We had an IDF spokesperson today actually go inside that hospital, show you that cache of arms there, which was in the basement, above which stands the hospital. There are hostages that are being held captive here is also the claim that Israel is making, that they could hear sounds, that they could feel that there were hostages that were being held in that basement, in those tunnels underneath this hospital, which is why they need to stand guard there to ensure that none of them are killed. Motorcycles are being used to ferry these hostages is also what Israel is claiming. Now, Israel says they have evidence that Hamas is using these hospitals as their headquarters, as their arsenal factories. They've shared pictures from the Rantisi hospital enclave and the neighborhood. Let me show you those pictures. Here is one of them that has been shared by the Israeli Defense Forces. They claim that there is a house of a senior official right next to a school. It's right behind there. There you can see on your screens. That is the house of the senior Hamas official. There's a school right there. There is a tunnel that comes out of it that leads from the house of the senior Hamas official into the Rantisi hospital, which was stormed today by the Israeli forces. Then they released another picture. This is what it looked like. This is the dig site is what they claim. This is what it looked like before the tunnel was built while the construction was on. Israel says this shows the entrenchment of Hamas and its terror infrastructure. You can see there's a UN building that's right in the neighborhood as well. So nothing is being spared by the Hamas terrorists, it was Israel claims. They then also shared video. This video is from outside a hospital. It's the Al-Quds hospital. Look at this man here. Israel says this is a man who runs with an RPG launcher into the hospital right after he fires an RPG rocket towards tanks that were standing guard towards Israeli forces there. So he comes out of the hospital, uses the RPG launcher and then walks back inside to get cover. Now, the Israeli defense minister has said that Israel has gained control of most of Gaza. He said Hamas has lost control of the Gaza Strip that it has ruled for 16 long years. The Israeli army said it has captured multiple institutions that are run by Hamas, especially as far as the Gaza city is concerned. Their mission, of course, is to end the war, and this is the beginning of the end. This is how Israeli forces have been mounting the offensive. On the 6th of November, IDF encircled Gaza city along the border. A week later, yesterday, on the 13th of November, IDF took control of the Gazan Parliament building. On the same day, they also closed in on the Al-Shifa hospital. They're standing guard now right outside the hospital. And then they said that they've also encircled the Rantisi hospital. They stormed it, revealed the terror factory that lied within. Now, hospitals in Gaza have come under fire. It's not just one or two, there are several of them. All of them from Israeli forces, and they have accused Hamas fighters of using these hospitals for their own military gain, of using these civilians as shields. These are the hospitals that are affected. This is the Gaza Strip. Like I said, it's not just one or two hospitals. Look at the amount of the number of hospitals that have been facing the brunt of this war. All of these are caught in the crossfire with patients inside, babies, infants inside who have been bearing the brunt of it. All of these hospitals have reportedly run out of fuel. They're facing shortage of medical aid. Some hospitals have also ceased to function because troops are encircling them. There's absolutely no way to keep them running because there is no power, there is no oxygen. The yellow line that you see, this is the border. The line that you see there, that's the yellow line. That is the evacuation road that has been declared by Israel. Israel says that is the border crossing, the safe haven as far as taking people out is concerned. The purple markings are where Israel is conducting its ground offensive, and that is only going to escalate in the coming few days. Here is a breakdown of the claims that have been made by both sides as far as using hospitals are concerned or attacking hospitals are concerned. The Al-Shifa hospital was one of the hospitals that saw perhaps the deadliest attacks there. The Palestinian side said that patients are dying there due to lack of oxygen because Israel is blocking it. Israel went on to say that Hamas is using it for military purposes and all they're doing is trying to choke the terror infrastructure and not the people that lie inside. We have another hospital then. Then the Palestinian side came and said that lives are at risk as incubators are running out of fuel, and it is the Israeli side that's ensuring that this fuel does not reach them anymore. To which Israel came out and said that we in fact did provide incubators and fuel to this hospital, but because Hamas threatened the hospital staff, it lies there untouched. The Al-Ahli hospital, Palestinian side said that Israeli forces are behind a deadly explosion that took place there. To which Israel came out and countered that terrorists in Gaza have attacked the hospital. They wanted to attack Israeli forces, but in the end ended up attacking the hospital itself. As far as the attack on the Al-Quds hospital is concerned, Palestine said that hospital ceases operations amid these Israeli attacks and there are people that are left in the lurch. To which Israel came out and said that there are terrorists hiding inside the hospital who attacked the troops, which is why they had to take action. Claims and counterclaims are being made from both sides. Depending on whose side you're hearing, you decide whether who's the victim here, who is the oppressor. That narrative changes depending on who you're speaking to. But unfortunately, civilians, babies, patients, infants are caught in the crossfire. But who exactly is responsible? Has Hamas exposed themselves? Has Hamas exposed their facade? And are they really using hospitals as shields? That's our big debate tonight.
No sign of any civilians here, and the soldiers have been telling us that even inside the stores they've been fighting things like rocket-propelled grenades ready to use against them as they were advancing through this area.
Hamas is using hospitals, like we showed the evidence in Shifa hospital, in other hospitals. We are now seeing it in live in Rantisi hospital. An operation still conducting right now.
हमास के आतंकियों के हथियारों के जखीरे को दिखाने के लिए एक मिलिट्री बेस पे, जूलियस मिलिट्री बेस पे, और ये देख सकते हैं ये माइंस आपको दिखा रहे हैं इस वक्त हम अपने कैमरे पर। हमारे कैमरा पर्सन करम सिंह लगातार हथियारों का जखीरा एक के बाद एक, सैकड़ों हजारों की संख्या में यहाँ हथियार रखे गए।
And it's my hope and expectation that there will be less intrusive action relative to the hospital. So I remain somewhat hopeful, but the hospital must be protected.
Hello, Moto.
Joining me on this broadcast to the right stand, Nadav Steinman, Board Chair, International Legal Forum, live from Jerusalem. Faisal Saleh, founder of the Palestinian Museum in the United States, also joins us on this broadcast. And Irina Tsukerman, our national security and geopolitical analyst, also joining us. But let me begin by asking Mr. Saleh, the pictures that we're seeing today, the pictures that have come out and released by the IDF, there are tunnels that lead from schools to hospitals, from hospitals allegedly to military establishments or homes of Hamas operatives. These are being used by terrorists for their movement, to stock up their piles. Don't you think this betrays the very cause of the Palestinian people? Because these people, or Hamas, who many would describe as self-proclaimed messiahs of the Palestinian cause, aren't they really the ones that are putting these Gazans in the line of fire?
First of all, I take issue in some of the references that you made. If you're going to call Hamas terrorist, you have to call Israel as terrorist, because Israel is a much bigger terrorist organization than Hamas is. Israel engages in outright terrorism on a daily basis against Palestinians in the West Bank and in Gaza, and Israel is prosecuting a genocide war against all of the people in Gaza, and Israel's aim is to clear Gaza of all Palestinians and settle it and add it to its territory.
Sure.
So I think your assessment is quite biased here, and you need to be a bit more objective in your approach here.
Sure, but the fact that Hamas is a terror organization is the description that has come to the fore from many world powers. What happened on the 7th of October? What happened on the 7th of October when the music festival was attacked? Is there any other way to describe what happened then other than calling it a terror attack?
Palestinians have the right to defend themselves, just like Israel claims it has the right to defend itself. This thing did not start on October 7th. It started in 1948 when Israel depopulated and destroyed 500 Palestinian villages and expelled 800,000 Palestinians, and took over their land, changed the names of their villages, and further, in 1967, Israel has occupied the Gaza and the West Bank, and this occupation had lasted 56 years, and has been putting Gaza under siege for 16 years. And there's nobody would tolerate this kind of aggression and this kind of that is terrorism, if there's any other definition for it.
Yes. Sure, and I would like to get in Nadav Steinman in on that as well. You know, Israel for so long has been claiming right since this happened that the action that they are, or the offensive that they are indulging in, is their right to self-defense. But as far as what's happening in the last few days, as far as what's happening in the hospitals in Gaza, babies, infants are being killed in the hospitals because there's lack of electricity, there's lack of oxygen. We've seen over 40 deaths in just the last 3 days because of the lack of these basic necessities as far as a hospital would go. Can there be any justification for that then?
Like Mr. Saleh, I'm not going to quote history. We'll talk about the facts on the ground. I certainly deplore any type of killing of innocent civilians. Unlike Mr. Saleh, I can actually deplore the killing of innocent civilians. Nevertheless, it's interesting in the opening aspect of this program, you've only shown evidence that Israel has provided, and you claim that there is evidence from Hamas. But however, there is all the pictures that you are showing, everything that appeared on your screen, your introduction was completed by analysis that the Israeli army showed. You have not also stated today that the Israeli army made a request to the world to bring in incubators to support newborn children in the hospital, and has requested aid to assist in that. So I don't feel like discussing these particular facts, because if we want to talk about acts of war, and I'm a lawyer working in international law, that when a hospital is used as a base for attack against another party, that a hospital loses itself as a protected zone. But also, what is most important, I think, is when this word genocide is put out. Genocide actually has a legal definition that was established right after World War II and has been updated by countries up until last year. There is an international convention against genocide, And in fact, every country has an obligation, every state entity has an obligation to prevent a genocide. It is Hamas, which is in its own charter, discusses not Palestinian liberation, but the eradication and annihilation of all Jews. That is in itself genocide. That is a definition of genocide. And Israel has an obligation, not only for itself, but under international law, as well as a state party, as well as a duty as an independent country to actually attack against genocide. That's what international law says. Nevertheless, if Mr. Saleh wishes to quote history, I do not wish to have a debate about history, and I do not wish to talk about the matters because I believe them to be wrong. But I don't think you invited me on this program to discuss those things. Should children be attacked? No. But should children be held hostage by Hamas? Should we talk about that? Should we talk about infants? Should we talk about 2-year-old children that are kidnapped and held as hostages by Hamas? So we talked about an unprovoked attack on civilians on October 7th. Now, if we extrapolate that 1,400 people in our numbers and compare them to the population, that would be over 200,000 Indians who were murdered in one day. I would not expect your country to be sitting and not expecting its citizens, not expecting there to be some kind of self-defense, which is an inherent right that every country has of self-defense. If suddenly in one day 200,000 people were killed in India, I wouldn't suspect that we would be having these conversations.
Sure.
You would be on the attack.
Sure. And the right to defend, as far as Israel is concerned, is something that has been condoned by every country, every world power, really, that we've seen over the last a month and a half or so since this happened on the 7th of October. But there are hostages that have been taken. 240 of them. We don't know what their status really is. They seem to now be using, seem to be used as a bargaining chip, really. And I want to get in Mr. Saleh as well. We're talking about collateral damage. We're talking about innocent lives. What about those 240 people? Many of them are foreign nationals.
Well, how about this? Israel has over 5,000 Palestinian hostages that it's holding in its prisons. These are people that were abducted in the middle of the night after kicking down their doors and going to their houses and blindfolding them and dragging them onto prison. They did not enter the prison as a result of it, responding to an RSVP from the Israeli prison authority. The Palestinians in Israeli prisons are hostages in any definition of the word. And there's no difference between Israel capturing those people and throwing them in prison and what the people that Hamas took and took them as hostages. Both sides have hostages. The only difference is Israel has over 5,000 of these hostages, and some of them have been there for years.
I'm sorry, I cannot have this tit-for-tat conversation. This is not useful. This is not a fair presentation of what the facts are on the ground to discuss 5,000 people who've been prosecuted under the rule of law in Israel, comparing them to innocent civilians.
What law? There's no law in Israel. There's no law that Palestinians are living under military rule. And you make the laws that you want to make. These are not laws.
I'm not debating these points. Sorry, I refuse to debate.
Sure. Let me also get in Irina Tsukerman, who's also on this debate. And I want to ask you this. You know, we've been talking about not just this terror attack that happened on the 7th of October. We're also talking about the bigger picture, as Mr. Saleh was also trying to get in the bigger picture, that this is not a one-time thing, this is not a one-month-old thing, this is something that has been going on for decades together. How do you see it then ending? What is the end? Where is that end? And when is that going to happen?
Well, the end of the conflict will depend on the Palestinians. They have been given options to create their own state throughout the entire duration of the conflict. Their leadership has refused, and their leadership has also considers Israel not a legitimate entity. So can there be a peace talk until the Palestinians at least decide to negotiate with Israel in good faith? I doubt it. In terms of Gaza and the solution for Gaza, Hamas will need to be destroyed as a military entity, and more measures will have to be taken to hold it accountable as a political entity outside of Gaza, because they're holding their own citizens hostage. They're preventing their citizens from getting the help they need. Israel offered fuel to Al-Shifa hospital, and that fuel was refused by Hamas. So the next time Hamas starts shedding crocodile tears about all the civilians who are dying in that horrible situation, they only have themselves to blame because they are rejecting aid for out of their political agenda. They hate Israel when they care more than they care about Palestinians. And as for the international community, they have a part to play in the future of Gaza, and that part depends on them. Instead of attacking Israel, they should be working with Israel to hold Hamas accountable, to freeze funding that provides Hamas with the ability to continue its reign of terror over Gaza and beyond its borders. And they should be working as part of a regional coalition to find a political solution for this conflict, to find a better governing structure, and to find a solution for the humanitarian situation. By humanitarian situation, I don't just mean lack of food and those types of shortages which can be easily remedied. I'm talking about the fact that Hamas has taken ideological hold over Gaza. It has been recruiting young children as young as kindergarten age as soldiers. That's complete child abuse, and we have not mentioned that at all. That humanitarian situation will need a regional approach to resolve, because you cannot have a population radicalized by Hamas and living next door to Israel. That's just not something that can resolve, even if you kill all of Hamas leadership in one go.
Sure, but when you talk about a political solution, yes sir, go ahead.
The only real permanent solution that can take place between Israel and Palestine is if Israel is willing to change the nature of its state from being a racist state only for the Jews, excluding anybody who's not Jewish, and treating them as fourth or fifth class citizens. If Israel is willing to live with the Palestinians as equals, each one of them having the same rights under a free society, democratic state, that will be a good solution. That solution would succeed. Anything short of that, where Israel is claiming superiority over Palestinians and calling Palestinians worse than animals, that kind of environment, there's no peace going to happen there with that kind of attitude. So looking forward in the future, Israel has to change its structure. You cannot have a racist state that's based on race anywhere in the world and expect to have peace.
But can there be peace with violence in the background as well? And Nadav Steinman, we were talking about, Ms. Irina was talking about a political solution, but many in Israel and many experts outside would say that a political solution is not possible because here you cannot be holding talks or holding negotiations with terrorists.
Well, let me say something here, please, hold on. There's nothing that Hamas does that Israel doesn't do, but at 1,000 times more. Name one thing, I challenge you to name one thing that Hamas does that Israel is not doing a lot more of.
Okay. Mr. Saleh is trying to provoke me, and I'm not entering into the dialogue with him because I don't know of any cases, I'll just use one, where any Israelis went into the uteruses of pregnant women, pulled out their babies and beheaded them in the presence of and he's drinking coffee while describing. Of course. Well, okay. Well, Hamas terrorists have actually recorded it themselves, so I guess
there's no evidence of that.
Perhaps then you should look on the internet a little bit more. Nevertheless, I don't feel there's a need to have this tit for tat conversation because the Palestinian people have been offered a state numerous times. They've been offered a state beginning in 1934, an appeal commission, in 1947, in the partition plan, and throughout all in 1948, in 1967, in the 1990s, in the 1970s when the negotiation with Sadat, in the 1990s in the Oslo Accord. There has been numerous. They've been presented with every so-called need that they had in 2000. If you don't know these things, and perhaps look in history, because this is evidence, every time they have been offered the things that they claimed that they want, they've refused. So there needs to be definitely a political matter with this, but this is not the time for this. I just don't understand the contextualizing of the murder of what happened and the savagery on October 7th. And to contextualize that is not something that I'm willing to discuss. There is never an excuse for barbaric savagery and terrorism. There never is.
Why are you doing it?
Mr. Saleh, I am not going to engage with you on these matters. You can try, but it's not going to work. I'm talking about the facts on the ground. There is no country in the world which would allow an entity living next to them. As I say these things, he drinks casually his coffee because he doesn't wish to hear that what is a matter of law, what is a matter of right to self-defense. Israel is surrounded by enemies. We have peace agreements with many of them, but Hamas seeks our eradication. Sir, I sit in Jerusalem. I do not know where you sit. I suspect it's in the United States. But Hamas wishes to eradicate me, wishes to annihilate me and my family. To claim that Israel is not allowing rights for Palestinians, perhaps you're not aware that 20% of the population of this country happens to be Palestinian. They vote, they elect Arab Muslim parties into the parliament. If that is what some make-believe, if that is not an equality of citizens, I don't know what else would. As a Canadian, whereas I spent most of my life until moving to Israel, we had a similar system. Every minority, I was a Jew and I was permitted to vote. I was permitted to vote as an English person in a French place. Equal rights are given in this country. Now, if you want to talk about a grander scale, we can have that discussion another time. But now we're talking about war. And in any country, if you sitting in the United States were attacked by Canadians who came over and lodged and murdered people in the northern parts of Canada, would the United States then come and have this conversation? If Pakistan went and invaded India and killed over 200,000 people in one day, would the world sit silent and talk about contextualizing that murder and savagery? No. The point is, Israel has a right for itself as self-defense. Israel has a right and an obligation under international law to eradicate a genocidal cult. Point final. End of discussion.
Yes, and that right to defend, and that right to defend has been, and that right to defend has been,
my only point,
backed by many world powers. But Mr. Saleh, yes, 30 seconds. I also need to get Ms. Irina in before I wrap this up. But 30 seconds to you, sir.
Yes. If the Canadian came and expelled the Americans out of their land into Mexico and stayed there, then the Americans who are in Mexico would have
there
the
is
right
never,
to
I'm sorry, a justification for
land.
terrorism is not something that can be discussed under any terms. Not on any side, no matter what point you say, there's no justification for terrorism. And the fact that you wish to utter the words to justify is an abhorrent view. It's a vile view. It's a Nazi ideology that you should be ashamed to be uttered those words. Because if an innocent child is taken from his mother's arms and killed in her presence, and I know those people where that happened to, and you telling me, and you drink your coffee once again, and you tell me there is a contextualizing of that,
drinking my
that
coffee.
is legitimate, and there's a reason for it, and it can
coffee.
be explained away, then sir, you're acting like the Nazis. You dehumanize Jews, and that is something that I will never accept, and we're willing to have a discussion with you on that basis. There is never a way to contextualize savage barbarism and terrorism. If you wish to put
what Israel is doing now,
I am unwilling to have that discussion now or ever.
The narrative differs on who's the victim and who's the oppressor, depending on who you're speaking to. And I said that right at the outset of this, there will be differing opinions about this entire conflict. And those are exactly what we've heard over the last few decades. But I want Ms. Irina to come in before I wrap this up. And, you know, the right to defend itself has been backed for Israel by many countries, but now we have many, including the United States, coming out and cautioning against a complete takeover, against hospitals being made into battlefields. Those words of caution that come in from your allies, from Israel's allies, should they also not be paid heed to them? What is the middle ground? What is the solution for that?
Well, President Biden was very clear that he's against a ceasefire or giving Hamas any sort of advantage that would allow it to rearm and continue attacking. During this entire time, Hamas continued rocket fire at Israel, and it has also been joined by various allies in the region who have also been targeting Israel this entire time. So the United States has been very clear. It has indeed worked with Israel to provide humanitarian aid, which includes daily humanitarian pauses that would allow civilians to leave.
Sure.
It has been very good in balancing these humanitarian issues and coordinating with other countries, and it has been supportive of the efforts to keep civilians safe as much as possible. But even the US cannot force Hamas to stop attacking its own population when they are trying to flee battlefields. This is not something US or anyone else can control unless they take action against Hamas as a political entity, completely delegitimize any assistance going towards it, and take action against its leadership that's outside Gaza and that's giving the orders. As far as other countries are concerned, I'm particularly astounded at the members of the Arab coalition who have faced identical circumstances in Yemen when they came under fire from hospitals taken by Houthis, who have now joined Hamas in attacking not only Israel but Saudi Arabia in border clashes, and who have faced the same sort of criticism and attacks from the international community, where Israel defended them from the identical techniques used by Houthis against their defense work in Yemen. And now they're coming out and attacking Israel as if they do not know that Hamas is engaging in completely illegitimate tactics, using human shields.
And that really seems to be emboldening, or that is what many around the world believe. That is exactly that support, covertly or overtly, is exactly what is emboldening the action that is being unleashed by Hamas on civilians. What started on the 7th of October continues 40 days on.
Wait a minute.
Unfortunately, I'm completely out of time. I have to thank all my guests for joining us here on this broadcast of The Right Stand. But